Hi, this is David Glesener. He's a student at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, PhD in social work. And I'm Carrie Wabanascom. Hi, I'm here to interview him for our project in partnership with the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus. And Dave has spent a lifelong career in child welfare and Indian child welfare in St. Louis County. So we're going to ask Dave a few questions and he's going to share his expertise. So the first question for you, Dave, is why did you become committed to Indian child welfare?
You make me sound like an old man here, which is the case. It's hard to deny that. I was at St. Louis County for 39 years, which was certainly as a career. And the where we're located up in Duluth, there are two reservations that are part of the county, and there, as probably many of the people that are watching this are aware of, the disrepresentation of American Indian families in child protection and in placements it's pretty astounding. In 2018, the Indian children were placed at a rate of 25 times what white families were, what white children were. And in that same year, 2018, 17% of all American Indian children are in placement. Those are numbers that are just simply astounding. And I think we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the interview. But the reason that I became involved with the Native American families is because that's what we dealt with a lot. And there's systemic reasons why that is, and there are certainly other not very good reasons why that is as well. And so there's change that needs to happen. Also, child welfare itself has changed tremendously. When I first started, the county social services system was actually a place to go for help. And many families came where voluntary would come in if they had trouble with children, if their kids were on drugs, or if they were running away, they would call the county and say, please, would you come meet with us? Can we help? And it was more of a therapeutic service. And then over the years, there's been cutbacks and cutbacks and cutbacks. And so now it pretty much, throughout the state of Minnesota, is a child protection system only. And you get involved only, or the county gets involved, only when there is danger to a child, either threatened danger or neglect, physical abuse, physical, sexual, mental abuse, and a few other categories as well. Can you hear me with?
Yeah.
Okay. So my caseload evolved into. It started out as pretty much a generalist of doing many things, and I really enjoyed that, of being a social worker to families that were in need, and I felt very helpful to them. Later on, it became child protection, as I mentioned, and then I became the supervisor of the ICWA unit, and that was by choice. The opening came up because I saw that there was such a great disproportionality, and there was such an unserved population in the Indian community. So that's where it all started. I was not raised Native, and I'm actually a farm boy from southern Minnesota. I didn't actually raise on a farm, but I was from Bird Island, which is a tiny farming community, which is very close to some of the historic situations that took place during the Indian uprising, the Dakota conflicts that took place in 1862, I believe is when it was. So that's how I ended up with working with Native families.
Thank you, Dave. Our next question is, what led to your involvement in working to improve child welfare systems for Native families? So maybe some of your current work.
And that really came out of the first work too, is that the systems really did not respond. I mean, the numbers we just talked about, the 25 times the placement rate for Native families versus white families, really says that the system is not working for Native families. It's easy to say it must be the Indians are doing something bad. No, that's not. The Indian communities have been hit and hammered in so many ways that the system really has not responded to the needs that they've got. And so that's I guess my response to that.
Thank you. What do you think are the most important things that child protection systems should know about working with Native families?
Some of the things that are forgotten in mainstream media and education is what happened in this country historically. Historical trauma is very real on Native reservations, and also the boarding school era. There was a concerted effort in order to just wipe out the Indian culture. And believe it or not, it was considered good for the Indians to do this, is to wipe out their culture because they could never survive. There was an arrogance and a belief that the white ways and Western civilization was the best civilization that there was, and that the Indian way of living was savages and savagery. And it was a step above barbarianism, but that it could not survive in a modern world. And the arrogance of those statements have not left the Indian community. And so what was happened is that children were removed from the reservations forcibly. And there's this conversation could go on probably for days about how that happened or how it was allowed to happen. And now it's forgotten, pretty much, but it has not been forgotten in the Indian community, and yet there still are many remnants of that, and it's bigger than remnants in terms of trying to subdue the Indian culture and make it subservient to white culture. So that's one thing the system needs to understand. The second thing, there really is a huge cultural difference between Indian families, American Indian families, and white families and mainstream families. That the connection of many American Indian people with their tribe and their community is so much greater, and the worldview is far more community oriented than it is in America traditional thinking. The American way of life seems to be the rugged individual, where you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And the Indian method is very different than that, and every tribe is different, but that seems to be a real common theme. And so because of that, there's a great strength in the Indian community, where the community itself can be a great resource to Indian families. When a child is removed from a family, it's devastating for parents, and it's true with American Indian families as well. But the tribe itself loses in the process too. The tribe feels that, and so the connection there is greater. And many of the tribes have a sense of aunties and uncles that because they live in the same area or a part of the same tribe, the sense of family is much greater, even though they may not even be blood related. So those are two major aspects of it, of the systemically. There needs to be a different way of working with American Indian families.
Thank you. What do you think are the most important things that child protection social workers should know about working with Native families?
The same things applies. Historical trauma would be really important. Secondly, would be sensitivity to the culture. It's not okay just to walk into a caseload and say, okay, here we go. There really needs to be an introduction to what it is like to be an American Indian family. Some traits I think that people need to be aware of as well is that I have found American Indian families to be far more open and honest about things. That honesty seems to be a far more important quality than it is. And so if you shade the truth, or if you as a social worker were to tip one way or another, that really gets noted, and the radar about are you a trustworthy social worker or not is really high, and that's hard to get back. Secondly is patience, is that American Indian families have been treated badly. Racism is very real. historical racism is and historical trauma is very, very real. In broken treaties, the boarding school era, and after the boarding school era, when adoption families were pulled for adoption against their wishes, that there's a really a lack of trust in this, and it's still there. And so social workers working in the families have to be patient, and it depends on the relationship, and that takes a while to get that. It's not something that bingo we can do. Let's change what we have here right now. The second thing is, because of the community nature of it, it's really important to partner with tribal social workers as well. And the way the ICWA laws are set up is to encourage that and make sure that happens. And even if a family is not an ICWA family, but is native, it's really important to invite the tribe in if the family is willing to have the tribe involved.
Thank you, Dave. That's all for our questions. Is there anything you would like to share on these topics?
Well, for me personally, I've really been pleased that I've been able to work with Indian families. I really have learned a lot. To work with a culture different from the one you grew up in, it really expands your own horizons and makes you think twice and have a much bigger worldview. And to question what you think and believe is always a good thing. And it builds lots of wonderful bridges. I mean, I have to admit that the relationships I have got with professionals in the Indian community, I treasure those dearly. And some of the families, I still get thank yous from families, and I feel privileged to be able to have walked on the reservations.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dave, and thank you for joining us for this segment with
Sure.
David Glesener. Please check out the other segment with him. He'll be talking about his educational experience at UMD. Thank you.